In the air to left, that sends back Gauthier. He's at the wall, and it's gone! Welcome back home, Dixon Machado. A two-run.
Here comes the 1-0. Fly ball to right, deep. Lopez going back at the track, and it's gone. Two-run home run for Shea Whitcomb. And it's now an 8-4 lead for Sugar Land. Winner in his first 3 starts. This is hit high and deep to left field. Leon sends it back to back onto the left field berm. And it's now a 6-0 lead for Sugar Land.
We're here to get you up to date on the Astros farm system. I've got the man with me, Kenny Van Doren from Astros Future, to talk about all things Houston Astros prospects and who you need to be keep an eye on, whether they're in Sugar Land or Asheville or anywhere in between. Let's talk about it right now.
Jainel Diaz, this is Locked On Astros.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Heisman and Brett H-Town Wheelhouse Chansey.
Hey guys, this is another edition of Locked On Astros, a special edition. I got the man Kenny Van Doren here with us, I would say live, but it's live for us right now. Thank you so much, Kenny, for joining us. Look, Locked On Astros, you can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to us on the way home from work, on the way to work, whether you may be on vacation this summer. You may be in Vegas right now and saying, man, I Locked On Astros, I can still hear them, and I can get up to date and stuff from Kenny Van Doren and Astros Future. I'll tell everybody where they can find me later. Kenny, where can they find you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter or X at the Vandalorian. And you can find the podcast I do with Jimmy Price wherever you get your podcast. Jimmy posts it everywhere, and it's called the Astros Future Podcast. Pretty simple.
Yeah, you guys you guys fired it back up. When I say fired it back up, it wasn't like it went away. It just, life gets the best of you, and you both are busy, and Jimmy's, out there serving the public every day here in the local area. And so I saw you guys were firing it back up. I was one of the guys that voted yes. So I absolutely love y'all's coverage. I love your articles. Totally jealous of all the interviews you guys get and throw them into article form. I know both of us have been at the games together there in the press box at AAA Sugar Land, but it's always a joy to have you. Just look, you guys know where to find me, Htown Wheelhouse, on pretty much any social media platform. Subscribe to our podcast. Go over to Astros Future. Check out their website. Get their newsletter. Subscribe to their podcast. You can even subscribe to stuff for them on X. I mean, they have a whole litany of things, and they're never short of information. We talk about slow news days. Well, we're covering one team for the most part. You guys got a different story, it seems like, every day. So right now, let's get into it. Who's hot right now? And before we start this conversation, we always hear right now, well, the Astros farm system is bad. The Astros don't have this. The Astros don't have that. But I just simply don't think that's true. Tell us right now, who are the hot players in the Astros system as we speak?
I think we have to start with Brice Matthews. Coming off the injured list, played 7 games. He had 6 home runs. A lot of those games, they are in Asheville, which is more of a hitter's haven down there in the South Atlantic League at high A. But I mean, coming off of a lower back injury, some of that lower back discomfort that he was suffering from that might have been contributing to some of those poor performances offensively at the start of the season, and then turning it up like this with 2 games with multi-home runs is pretty impressive for Brice Matthews. And that's, he's the hottest hitter right now for the Astros, won South Atlantic League player of the week, and has been playing pretty nice defense from what we can see. Of course, you can't see those games down there in Asheville, but when he's on the road, he plays well. And something I liked from Tuesday night is he was drawing a little bit more walks. Guy likes to swing the bat, and he makes some good contact, lofts a lot of those balls out of the park and not really popping them up, but he's hitting, having a good fly ball rate as of late, and all around just playing really well right now as the former first-round pick.
And that's important because we can even relay this back to the big league club. I would think one of the things that's hurt the Astros is they seem to be less patient at the plate. They're swinging a lot more at stuff out of the zone. Now, they're still not striking out the most they're still one of the top teams, but they're not the top team, and they are chasing a lot, and that's huge. And I go back to this often, but I remember Rojas talking about when he was in our system and he got a visit from Josh Reddick. He was trying to pull the ball in Corpus, and Josh is like, no, hit it to the opposite field. And look, that helped his swing. And how anxious is a player, someone like Brice Matthews, a local product, might you add, a guy that has a pretty high ceiling from what I understand. You would think that this kid being young, man, he's going to press, man. I've been out, I'm feeling good. And you know how it is. If you or I sustain an injury, whether it's from running or playing some beer league softball team, like you want to get back on the field quickly. And sometimes you can rush it back, but apparently you were wondering lower back, how's he going to do? He has performed admirably. And I'll ask you later on if you think he's on the move, but who else? Because Brice Matthews, local product, I think most Astros Nation knows about him, but what other guys do we have out there that are, hot on the radar?
Yeah, I think another one you have to go to is Jake Bloss, who's catching a lot of steam recently, especially from Dana Brown, who talks about him almost every time he's on Sports Talk 790. If you're listening to that, he said he's been throwing mid-90s right now, added that sweeper. The strikeouts have kind of gone away, which kind of happens when you see some of these pitchers move up the system. I mean, you're going to strike out a lot of guys in single A, you're going to strike out a lot of guys in high A, but how can you translate that to the Texas League, which can be make or break, especially on the hitting front, but also for a lot of pitchers, because as of late, we're seeing guys skip AAA in the last couple of years, especially on the pitching front. Even Drew Thorpe, who's with the White Sox now, made his major league debut on Tuesday. He didn't even pitch in AAA this season.
Wow.
He came right out of AA Birmingham and went and made his major league debut. But for Jake Bloss, he is at 29 strikeouts right now through 38 and a third innings. So he's not even averaging a strikeout per inning. And but that whip, that's the thing that's been really standing out to me, is it's at 0.76 in 38 and a third innings. That's a pretty impressive whip for the Texas League, especially if it's your first time at AA and your first full professional season, drafted in the third round last year. Dana Brown even mentioned he's been throwing too many strikes and they need to get him to get a little bit more, pitches out of the zone, get some more chase out of him. But as he keeps moving forward, if he's going to keep receiving his flowers from the general manager, and he's 22 years old, he'll be 23 in a week or two now. So it's just someone to keep your eye on, maybe a guy who even skips AAA if they really need the depth. But there are guys ahead of him like Colton Gordon, AJ Bluebaugh, especially some of those other veteran guys. Even Blair Henley is on the 40-man roster at AAA right now. But if you want a guy like Jake Bloss, who's very mature for where he is in his professional career and very developed, even Jimmy Price, who went to talk with him, you can read his article on Astros Future about it. He just said he's just solid guy like that, like physically solid. Like he just looks the part already to be a professional pitcher at one of the highest levels. So it's just really just honing in on the development of those pitches, and especially the sweeper, and just getting that fastball, just keep commanding it well in the mid-90s.
So tell me, and I don't necessarily want to chase this rabbit, because I'm pretty sure when I ask you this question, this is something you could probably go on for hours and hours. But how does someone like a Jake Bloss not get, like, why do you have guys that get recognition upon recognition upon recognition, but someone like Jake Bloss, they just, you see the body of work, you see what he's doing, but he just doesn't get the publicity. Is there a rhyme or a reason? Is there just a bias towards, if you're not in a certain tier of prospect, that you're just kind of ignored until you do something big?
It's a good question, and a lot of people need that answer. And I think it's safe to say, even like looking at where Jake Bloss was in his college career, pitched at a school called Lafayette in Pennsylvania for a couple seasons and flew under the radar. I mean, he didn't have draft opportunities. He had a couple offers to be a UDFA, didn't take any, went to Georgetown for academics, as well as just seeing that this school was good at baseball and on the up and up. And he ended up being the Big East pitcher of the year. I mean, he played a lot of the parts. It was just the perfect fit for him. Improved his stock to become a third rounder after just being a UDFA option a year before. And you kind of look at where he was last season, pitched in 7 games, 2 at the complex, then 5 in Fayetteville. And, he did take flight at Fayetteville, boosted himself into a lot of those top 10s and the top 15s for prospect rankings from various sites. And the thing about that is, prospect rankings, you probably won't see another major update for a lot of these ones until, post draft, when those first rounders, second rounders, maybe, premier high school kids join these organizations, and they'll move up into the system. And then you kind of see where that goes from there. But I think for Jake Bloss, maybe he's not a top 100 guy by multiple websites. But I do think, he is probably the best pitching prospect for the Astros right now. And that's, not just saying I'm on, high on everything that he's been doing recently, but it's just everything is just going so well. And he looked like AJ Blueball was the guy who's like, oh my gosh, this guy's rapidly moving through the system as a starter. Jake Bloss is doing it even faster than he is. And it just seems like he is just in that spot right now. And, like I said, you want to see a little bit more strikeouts from him. But right now, I think he is probably the top guy in the Astros system regarding pitching.
No, yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I've noticed as I've paid more and more attention to, these players, especially when you interview them, you feel like you kind of get to know them. I was always impressed with Hunter Brown and just his presence, his professionalism. I've always been a big fan of Sean Dubin, just the way he focuses. Jake Myers really comes to mind. The first player that I interviewed that actually was called up shortly after I interviewed him was just like, okay, Jake's going to be a major league player. And that's encouraging to hear. And, because you never know with these guys. I mean, you look at the unfortunate story of someone like Justin Dearden, who, 2 years ago was the talk of Astros camp, was, coming up, the beard, the power, and baseball's a very difficult game. Here in our next segment, I do want to talk about some more guys that may be flying under the radar. Here on Locked On Astros, we pride ourselves in getting you the latest news on your team year-round, whether it's off-season, draft, or in the playoffs. You know what else is year-round? That's right, collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and seize property. So don't let the IRS target you. Let licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. For myself, I've got my self-employment status, I've got my freelance work, and I've got my regular job. So that's kind of a whole complicated thing, and I've got different things I have to file. So why not go with someone like I have that has over 14 years experience, an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau? Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters like myself that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and you need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/locked-on. See the link in the episode description below. Yeah, so Kenny, thanks for joining us. And again, we want to remind y'all to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to Astros Future, subscribe to their podcast, get their newsletter, follow them on all socials, follow Kenny at the Vandalorian on X, and Astros Future. So check them out. Thank you again, for joining us, Kenny. Just also make sure y'all check out Locked On Sports Today. It's the only 24/7 streaming sports channel on YouTube, so check that out. And Michael Connor over at the Locked On Astros postcast as well. Have you covered not just for Astros, but also for Texans, Rockets, and Cougars sports throughout the season. So look, this is exciting. Brice Matthews, a local product, Jake Bloss making moves, and you hear of guys leapfrogging. I remember talking to a former major league pitcher who actually has helped in the training process with Spencer Arrighetti. And I asked him, I was like, what's your take on Arrighetti? And this is before the season started. He said, well, I'm just going to tell you this. And he was like, I don't want you to say anything until he makes it. But he said, Spencer Arrighetti is going to be there a lot sooner than later. He goes, the kid has got stuff. He is ready. If he just hones in that walk rate, the kid's got big league stuff. And I was like, okay. He was like, but I don't want you saying that right now. I don't want to put more pressure on him. So it's really cool to see that. What other names, maybe, what other position players or even pitchers are out there that, we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, one guy I meant to mention a little bit earlier about, who's hot right now, but he still just continues to fly under the radar for me is Luis Baez, who is ranked, top 5 by pretty much every website that's been ranking Astros prospects. He did leave last night's game a little bit early after 4 at-bats. The Taurus did run up the score a little bit at Greenville. I didn't see anything from watching that game, if anything was apparent. So nothing to assume there if there's anything wrong. But over his last 10 games, I mean, he's hitting 318 with an OPS north of 900. And it feels like you don't really hear much from the guy. I know half of his games during the season are not in front of cameras unless Astros player development posts it. But 3 home runs, 14 RBIs, just a guy who's still at the top of these lists. Seems like he flies under the radar just because, I mean, you don't really know too much about him. I don't think I've ever heard Luis Baez speak before. I haven't read many of his quotes before. So it's still a guy that's a little bit flying under the radar, as with Brice Matthews playing well. And then, Jacob Melton, who's still on the mend right now with that wrist injury. Those are some of the guys that are at the top, but still need to keep your eye on Luis Baez. Some of those under the radar ones, though, it's kind of a tough season so far. It seems like some of the guys that were probably in those top rankings aren't having the best starts to their season. We're in June now, so you want to see some guys start to heat up. But 2 guys that were taken at the end of the last 2 drafts are really catching my eye right now. And one of them is Pascal Ferreras, who was Mr. Irrelevant, last pick taken in the 2023 draft, was the first position player from the 2023 class of the Astros to reach AA. And it seems like he's just kind of mirroring production. He's now played more games at AA. He was that player of the month for the Astros minor league system back in April, but 853 OPS in Corpus Christi right now, playing across the infield, was playing first base last season, just more out of necessity. But right now it's second, short, and third, and playing good defense there. A guy that we talked to on the Astros Future podcast for Monday's episode. And he mentioned, I looked at opportunities outside of the United States, tried to get into the international market back when he was coming out of high school, had some workouts, nothing really worked, ended up going to college and really just turned it up from there. It's been kind of a steal for the Astros and one of those late picks. And it seems like the Astros have done well. Ryan Wrobleski had a good season last year. He's providing depth at AAA now, but Pascal is a guy to keep your eye on kind of moving forward. He's just been a really fast riser and has a good head on his shoulders. Another guy, John Garcia, speaking of guys that were taken late, 19th round pick in 2022, first minor leaguer to record 5 doubles in one game. That goes back to like 2003 or 2005. But that's because there wasn't single game records kept before that for minor league baseball, which is a little bit unfortunate. So it dates back to then, at least then. So on record, it is the first time it's ever happened. But John Garcia had his first multi-homer game on Tuesday, like I mentioned, in that game where Asheville just kept running up the score. 288 batting average, 845 OPS. And you can kind of point to maybe he's playing in that hitter's haven. He is a righty, so maybe doesn't really play into that wall being less than 300 feet away for lefty hitters in Asheville. But he's hitting better on the road for the Tourist right now. And John's kind of putting it together. He is a catcher, for those that don't know. I haven't read the best reviews of him as a receiver, just at the position. And he played a lot. He's playing a little bit more first base, dating back to the Grapefruit League during spring training with the Astros. So there is that option there. But he's throwing out runners at a clip, higher than 20%. So I think that's a good spot for him right now, kind of moving forward. And I think he could be in AA at some point this season, especially after the draft with Wrobleski moving up right now. There are only 2 healthy catchers in Corpus Christi, and that being one of them is JC Correa, who hasn't really played much catcher this season. But at the same time, I just might be a little bit tough to get him up to AA for the time being, especially if Cesar Salazar goes back down to AAA in the next week or two. Pushing Wrobleski back to AA. So just a guy to watch and keep an eye on is John Garcia as well.
Yeah, definitely. And those are names that we wouldn't, unless we were maybe a season ticket holder at one of these minor league parks, we probably wouldn't even know their name. And, but I've always been impressed with whenever we talk to these players early on in their career and then they move forward. And a guy that I've had the opportunity of meeting, but obviously it was a limited conversation because the whole Spanish English barrier, which I'm working on my Spanish right now, but it's still not great. Pedro Leon, there's a lot of people. And number one, you answered, we actually had a question from someone about Melton. And so he is still injured. They were like, why hasn't he played a month? What's going on? I was like, I don't know. I'm assuming he's still on the IL. But Pedro Leon is interesting because Elvis Rodriguez, Rafael Pena, former hitting coaches for the Astros, now with the Phillies and Cardinals, respectively, and they're doing great there. They were like, look, Pedro is a 5-tool guy. He just, that hit tool, he's just not a natural hitter, and if he can figure that part of his game out, the guy can be a superstar. He started hitting for a little bit better average, dropped his swing rate or his chase rate down a little bit. He's striking out a little bit less. Is there a formula for Pedro Leon to make it up to the Astros in 2024? Or is there just such a log jam that he's going to have to just outshine everybody and just make a massive, explosion before he gets, his opportunity?
Yeah, I'll start off with, I did talk to him 2 or 3 weeks ago, last home series. That's not this week for Sugarland. And it just sounded like more, it's just comfortable, getting more comfortable at the, just in the system. I mean, so much hype behind him. They made him switch positions, made him play shortstop and then second base. And neither of those worked. They're in the rear mirror. It's, it's out of the window. I mean, it's just an outfielder now, strictly outfield. I'm sure if they really need him to play one of those positions down the line and in a pinch, maybe they look to him, but the outfield, that's where he is. And it's just that comfort of just knowing that he's back in that position. You can show off that, what is a 60 grade arm, according to some websites, even better than that at different ones. So it's just, he's just defensively, that's where, it's key, but it's also just knowing, I was talking with him through Vladimir Sutil, who's the development coach down there. He's very close with him in Sugarland. And he was just talking about, finding your pitch, how can you score runs? Pedro Leon has taken pride in being one of the best run producers in minor league baseball this year. I don't know if he still is, but at some point he was leading minor league baseball in RBIs 2 weeks ago. And that was just one thing, is find your pitch and, score someone. It's not just about hitting home runs. And that's the big Sugarland culture. They're in first place right now in their division in the PSL or PCL. And that's, kind of big around, who Mickey Story is. Mickey Story cares about the record. He cares about winning. Last time he won was in 2021, is last time he took a division title. So I think he wants to get back to those winning ways. And if he has a guy like Pedro Leon playing well, I think he's in a good spot. But the only thing, talk about, those walk rates, going up and the strikeout rate going down. He's still hitting well this month right now through 39 at bats, recording here on Wednesday. He's hitting 282 with a 462 slug, but the on base percentage is below 300 because he hasn't walked yet this month.
Okay. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun, exciting way to get in the action while you watch your favorite sports teams and players. Right now, pick more or less on 2 or more player stats to win up to 100 times your money. Download the app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for your first deposit match of $100. You can turn $10 into $1,000. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in 60 seconds, and all you need to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 players' stat projections, and you're locked in. The finals mean more on PrizePicks, so do the star players get boosted payouts on select baseball stars, and you won't find this anywhere else. You can also make the lineup that you want, your dream lineup, and go with strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs, and so much more. 100 times your money, you can cash in big. So make sure that you make PrizePicks the place you go for fantasy sports. Again, use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for your first deposit match of up to $100. Using the code LOCKEDONMLB, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
So maybe he's kind of in a dip in that sense, maybe just doing a little bit too much. Because even when I asked him at the time, he was like, they want him to be a little bit better on the base paths. You talk about those 5 tools. He can run. Pedro Leon can run. They want him to tap into more of that speed and, be there, in multiple aspects of the game. But he also mentioned, he's not thinking about the major leagues. I mean, he's in a good headspace right now that he's just caring about, where he is. And I think that multiple people have documented that well over the last couple of weeks, is that, he cares about, this team and winning. And I think that's where the Space Cowboys are right now. But when you talk about how can he get to the major leagues, I think, just kind of keep doing what he's doing. And, once the trade deadline comes around and you see where this roster shakes out, maybe he does slip on there as another outfielder, as a center field option that he's been considered for the, through 3 different regimes for the Astros. So right now, I just don't know where he kind of falls into place. There have been a lot of injuries, and if he can kind of get back into those walking ways and cutting down his strikeouts like he was the last 2 months, you can just keep kind of adding on to that, because we know he has the power. We know he has the exit velocities. He even hit a 500-foot home run that actually wasn't 500 feet. It was pulled back. But, I mean, the power is there for this guy. And it's just kind of a matter of time and a space on the roster if it opens up.
Yeah, because I get that question a lot. I get a lot of DMs. What's up with Pedro Leon? Like randomly. And I try to answer it as intelligibly as I can, even if I look at stuff. But thank you for that breakdown. So what we're going to do in our last segment is we're going to talk about, maybe who's on the move, not necessarily who do we see coming up to the big league club, because I think that is a huge cluster of conversation just because of the injuries, the roster moves. We don't know what they're doing with certain players, some players to be named later, or guys we won't even mention. But, just kind of frustrating this fan base. But in our last segment, we're going to talk about who's on the move. All right. So, hey, Kenny, once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for checking out Locked on Astros. Check out Astros Future. Check out Kenny, the Vandalorian, on X. I'd absolutely love that you took your name. See, my last name is not Wheelhouse. It's Chansey. So I had to come up with a whole different moniker for mine. But I do want to get to this. Who's on the move? If I'm in Corpus, like who is the next kid that I know that I'm going to at least get to see towards the end of the season, or if the big club does make decisions and shake up the roster, who is going to be going from Corpus to Sugar Land? Because if they pull from Sugar Land, you got to fill the void. So, like we talked earlier, Salazar went up. They brought up the guy from AA, catching and so on and so forth. So, what moves or what players are most likely to move up if their trajectory continues to go in the right direction?
AAA rosters are just always, it's always tough. If you look at where the Space Cowboys are right now and compare it to the beginning of the season and look at the rosters, you can tell that a lot of these headshots aren't of Space Cowboys players. They're taking headshots from different teams just because it just changes constantly, and it's just kind of like a haven for those 4A guys, that the major leaguers that just don't have a spot in the major leagues. And so it can be always tough. At the end of the season, you start to see those guys kind of trickle out by either release, trade, or they made the major leagues. And you kind of just want to, who's going to really move up into that category. It's a little bit tough. Maybe Jake Bloss does take that jump in the next week or so, next couple of weeks, like Dana Brown has kind of hinted at. Some other pitchers like Aaron Brown, who's kind of flying under the radar as well, was taken on day 2 or even early day 3, I believe, in the 2021 draft. And I think he has a good arsenal of pitches. It's just really kind of honing in and building off consistent starts. Cesar Gomez, who's a reliever right now, kind of under the radar too, has pitched at AAA. A little bit older for AA right now. He's 25 years old, but he's a really good friend with Spencer Aggetti. He speaks very highly of him, but even for himself, Cesar Gomez is having a good season, 1.46 ERA out of the bullpen and a whip south of 1. So those are some guys that I would keep an eye on if you're looking at some pitchers, even Julio Urbana, who had one start at AAA, but he's on the injured list at the moment. So if you're looking at some of those guys that might be in AAA at some point this season, those are the ones I would just keep my eyes on. They're in AA. For guys that move up to from high A, like I mentioned earlier, maybe John Garcia, maybe some pitchers kind of fall into that category. Just got to see how these guys kind of build off some of those starts earlier in the season, like Trey Dombrowski, who's a top 30 guy by multiple websites, not having the best season. I wanted to throw out some guys though in AAA right now, and one of them is Shea Whitcomb. We've heard about Shea for years now. He is also Mr. Irrelevant, last guy taken in the 2020 draft. Each season just gets a little bit better. 2021 wasn't a good year for him, but he got better defensively. 2022, he was tied for the lead in minor league baseball with home runs, ended up winning the Joe Bauman Award for the most home runs in minor league baseball that year. Improved walk rate, really just, honing in late into counts. He gets behind really early, and then he kind of takes pitches and then he does damage. It's a good formula for him right now. And Shea's a good guy, just a good character, really laid back, has that California mindset that he's mentioned before. So Shea is a guy to look out for if they want a bench guy, a utility guy in the next coming months, if the roster shakes out with injuries, trades, whatever happens by August. One more guy I want to mention, I think he deserves his flowers, is Brian King, who people probably don't even know who Brian King is. He's a reliever in AAA for the Astros. Didn't pitch in 2023 as he was recovering from Tommy John surgery, but the Astros took him in the AAA phase of the Rule 5 draft in 2022 from the Cubs. He has a 1.82 ERA in nearly 30 innings this season. His whip is at 101. 9 walks to 36 strikeouts. The guy's doing it all right now. He is 27, so he's on the older end for a AAA pitcher. I'm going to talk to him after we record this on Wednesday in Sugar Land, so maybe I'll have a little bit more to talk about him there and see what they've been doing to his arsenal. But the Astros, it kept hold of him, with the change of the regimes, and he's playing really well. So I think it was a good choice by the Astros there. Maybe a guy that kind of comes up late. He does remind me of like a left-handed Seth Martinez in the sense that he's playing really well, flying under the radar, and it was a Rule 5 pick for the Astros. So if the Astros do want to shake up at a lefty reliever, maybe Mushinski or someone else isn't really giving what they want, maybe they do turn to Brian King in the next couple months.
I'm glad you said that, because if I were to go to my next Space Cowboys game or cover one here soon, I would be like, who is this guy on the mound? Now I know who Brian King is. So that's why we turn to you. That's why we turn to Astros Future for our Astros prospect news. Man, this has been a great episode. I appreciate you stopping by. Your knowledge is second to none. The coverage you give, the work you do is top notch. And I mean it when I say it. I know one of these days you're going to be one of the guys that they're talking to on MLB Network. You're going to have your own, the Vandalorian bomb just hit, and Kenny's reporting that the Houston Astros have signed Kyle Tucker's son, Kyle Tucker Jr., to a $300 million deal, whatever. So, but yeah, Kenny, thanks for joining us. So if I'm correct, podcast, you can subscribe to it. Astros Future, y'all have a newsletter,
Yep.
correct? And I mean, so just tell the people where they can find you one last time, and how they can reach you, and I mean, maybe if you're willing to take some questions from them, let them know where they can go.
Yeah, you can find me on X or Twitter at the Vandalorian, and I realized I didn't have my DMs open to everyone, so those are now open again. If you ever have any questions, if you just want to throw some takes out there, throw some ideas, I'm always free to talk. I'll never ignore you unless it's just a question that keeps getting repeated, and I have been repeating the answer, but it usually doesn't happen. So if you ever have any questions, even at me on Twitter. Reply to me, and I'll make sure to reply to you, and we can have a conversation about any Astros prospect, any prospect. I've been watching a lot more of all these teams recently, so if you ever have anything, just feel free to reach out, and you can find us at astrosfuture.com, and the podcast, Astros Future Podcast, is wherever you can find your podcast. It'll be there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been another great show for us here at Locked on Astros. We went to the farm. We found out what's going on. I think the future is bright. Don't be talking about the window closing. It's wide open. And for myself, Kenny Vandalorian, and Kenny Van Dorn, the Vandalorian, and everybody, Astros Future and Locked on Astros. Remember, we're your team every day. Go Stros.